Okay, so today we will continue with discussing the principles of design. Okay, and we will cover rhythm and emphasis today in detail. So, starting with rhythm. First of all, what is rhythm? The meaning of rhythm as a word. Everybody heard about the word rhythm. When you listen to music, every song have a rhythm to it. But this is listening to music. We also have a visual rhythm. Visual meaning using our eyes. So when we look at a design and we see rhythm, in music we hear rhythm, but we also see rhythm, okay? So, in some designs, in some compositions, sometimes you need to include rhythm for a particular purpose, of course. Selection of principles of design must have always a reason in design, okay? So, so when we have visual rhythm, for example, if you look at this composition here, this is a building, but what we care about, the composition, the elements that are used here. So if we look carefully, we can actually see lines, okay? Lines. So, if you look at this line, for example, it's a curved line, and then it repeats. So, a particular line keeps repeating, as well as this. Repeat. So, every time we have repetition of a particular element, it creates a rhythm. Now, what we repeat, how we repeat it, every time we create different effects of rhythm. But we need to have repetition to have rhythm in a design. Now, we will see plenty of examples. Wait a second. So, here we have what? Again, elements. What are these elements of design? Shapes. Circles, shapes. These are shapes also. So, and what is happening here? They are repeated. Repeat. Here also repetition. This is a linear repetition. So the circles are horizontally, vertically repeated. Here also, but because of the shape type, which is a hexagon, it creates this kind of repetition. But the same shape, repeat. Here the same thing. So we have a rhythm. We have here rhythm. Maybe it's a boring kind of rhythm because it's the same thing, repeated, but this composition have a rhythm, this composition have a rhythm. And also this have a rhythm. Now here, we don't see one thing repeated, the same. But there is a rhythm if you look at this line. So we see these triangular forms here. Now this is different than this is different than this. So each one is different as we go along, but there is a rhythm. The result is a feeling of rhythm. It is about the feeling, it is about the visual, what we feel when we look at something. So there is a rhythm here. There is a repetition, just each one is different than the other. Now we will see there is several types of rhythms. It's not just one type. It's not just taking a shape and repeating it. So we have now rhythm by repetition. Essentially, we need to have repetition to have a rhythm. Repetition very important for rhythm. But we can have rhythm by gradation also. Rhythm by radiation, rhythm by opposition, and by transition. All of these are types of rhythms. All of them have repetition in them, but in different ways. Like this, for example, there is a repetition, but each one is different than the other. Okay? So we will see many examples. Now this is the first one. We just have a repetition, rhythm by repetition. So we have It could be a shape, it could be lines, it could be color, something that is being repeated. Okay, so here we have these shapes, and they are being what? Repeated. The same shape. Here we have the location difference. So one is up, one down, one up, one down. But it is, so here it goes like this. But it's the same shape repeated. We can see these lines here. They're also repeated. Okay? Repetition of lines, repetition of shapes, and repetition of color. We can even see color being repeated. The same color. So, do we have rhythm here? Yes. There is a type of rhythm. Whether it's a nice visual rhythm or ugly visual rhythm, that's a different story. But do we have a rhythm? Yes. Here we have real objects. So these are like columns. The same ones are repeated, repeated, repeated. Even the colors are repeated. So it doesn't matter if we have 3D object or a 2D, for example, poster. It doesn't matter. Do we have repetition? Yes. Then we have rhythm. Okay? So this is the most basic idea about rhythm, that it needs to have repetition. Okay? More examples, but here we start seeing some variations. So here what we have a repetition of this shape or combination of shapes. But look, each one looks a little different than the other. But it is still repeated, just with some variation. We do have rhythm here, okay? But there is some kind of a transition, okay? So, here what do we have? Circles, shapes, meaning what element of design? Shape. It's being repeated, just the size is changing. So we have big ones here, becoming more and more smaller. And this visually also, it gives us rhythm, a feeling of rhythm, plus a direction of vision. So my vision is directed. And creating direction of vision is important in design. Because you want, usually when someone look at your design, to start somewhere, and then the vision to flow through the design in a particular way. You are the designer of this. You should know how people should look and see your design. In which way? So having direction helps. Now because we have repetition here, we have also rhythm, a type of rhythm. Here what? Repetition. We have repetition. What's repeated? The square. Just the square is being rotated, and become big, 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 big. Okay? So change in size of the same element, which is a shape, that is being repeated and rotated. The end result is a rhythm. Okay? Now, all of these have in common what? Repetition. There is something getting repeated. But it's not always the same shape or line being repeated. It can change size, as you can see. It can change rotation. It can make modification to the initial shape or line. So we have other types of rhythms that we need to explain. Okay, so not all rhythms are just the same thing repeated all over. Now, before I give you more examples, just to mention this because this is very important, the rhythm in design, especially when you design designs that consist of several pages. So, for example, magazines, booklets, reports. Like in this class, in one of the projects, you will have to write and design a report that has many pages. Now, how do you design this? It must have consistency of style. This is a very important word. Consistency of style. And you can create this by including the principle of design rhythm. So, for example, you have, let's say, 5 pages. When I look at these 5 pages, the first page, the second, the third, there must be something repeated. For example, if you used here red color, you cannot use on the next page green and then blue and then yellow and then if you selected a color range, you must repeat this to create consistency of style. Sometimes shapes are repeated. For example, the title or a color. Like, for example, I use this color for this title. When we go to the next title, I cannot put another color. Or to change, for example, the font size, or to change the location of my title. So there must be, you see that the fonts are like lines. So where do I put the lines as a title? I cannot put them in this page here, on the next page here, on the third page somewhere else. So we have to keep the style consistent. So we have to use repetition. The same size repeated, the same shapes repeated, locations repeated, colors repeated. To create that, this book or booklet or brochure or whatever consists of the same whole, not separate. You need to understand this. This is very, very important. And to do this, we need repetition, and this creates a rhythm in the whole design. Okay? Now, we have, as I said, different variations of rhythm. One of them is rhythm by gradation. We already actually saw gradation. So when we had the shapes which were the circles, some of them small, some big, this is changing the size, like this, for example. But notice the word gradation means from gradual, means slowly. Like we have this shape, which is a rectangle. Here, repeat, 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 repeat. But look, slowly, gradually. So this becomes smaller, then more smaller, then smaller. So it's like not suddenly, not big and very small. No, big and then smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay? So it's a gradation. Transition by gradation. And this can also create rhythm. So you don't have to have the same shape, the same size repeated. You can change the size, but gradually. Or it can be, for example, look at this shape, repeat, repeat, the same thing, the same size here, but the darkness is different. So this is very dark, and then become more lighter gray, more light, more and more and more. Okay? So it's like a gray scale. A gray scale also gradually it changed from white to black. So we have this in here. So all of these ways create rhythm. What else? By gradation. We can have color change. So for example, we start with a color. So we don't need only shapes and lines. No, we can have color, and this color slowly change to another color. It is similar to from black to white, but we can have a color, for example, starting with a color and slowly becoming another color. The slow gradual change. This can create a rhythm also in the composition. Even with lights, you know how you design the lights, where you place the lights. The color of the light can create in an interior rhythm, because lighting is part of the interior design. So, color, lights, shapes, lines, forms, everything is part of the composition. And how you use them depends. Do you want rhythm? If you want rhythm, you need to have repetition of some sort. Okay? This is more examples about gradation. So, for example, here, what do we see? We see, for example, rectangles. This rectangle starts big, gradually becomes small. And even these shapes here gradually become smaller and smaller and smaller. So what do we have here? We have repetition and we have gradation. So we have rhythm here, a type of rhythm created. Here what? Here we have these small hexagon shapes. The same size all over. They're the same size, repeat, repeat, repeat. So we have repetition, that means we have rhythm. But we also have gradation. We have rhythm by gradation, because look at them from the distance. it looks like here it's very heavy, a lot of shapes, and here they spread out, become less shapes. Here more, here less. But gradually, slowly change, okay? So, we have rhythm by gradation also. We have repetition, we have gradation, so we have rhythm in the end. So yeah, this is one example of a type of rhythm. Now we have another type, radiation, rhythm by radiation. When we say that, it means we have a center. A center from which rhythm starts. A center from which repetition of some element starts. Shapes or lines or colors or whatever, okay? So from a center. So here, for example, we have a square in the center. This square, from here, start increasing the size, gradually rotating. So we have actually here what? Here, in this composition. Repetition, we have gradation and radiation. 3 types of rhythm here. In a composition, we can have more than one type. So we have rhythm by repetition. Where is the rhythm by gradation? The square changing size and becoming bigger from small to big gradually. Where is the rhythm by radiation? Because it starts from a center. Okay? So all of these types, it's not just words. We need to, when we see a composition or we design a composition, to willingly, to basically, it's a planned thing. Do I want to make it this way or that way or combine different types? It is not by accident. Nothing is by accident in design, okay? Also, when you design something and someone asks you what's going on here in this design, explain it. What's happening? You know, you have to use these words. You have to start explaining what elements of design you used. Shapes or lines, colors, what did you use? Then how did you use them? How did you organize the composition? Which principles of design did you use? Did you use rhythm, for example? Did you use this, that? How did you use rhythm? What types? And why? So you need to explain it in design terminology. You cannot just say, oh, it's a nice composition, I like it. This is how someone, not a designer, talk. Designer need to use correct terminology, meaning explaining a design, starting from the elements of design, then what principles of design were used to organize this composition, to communicate a message. So all of these elements, principles of design used, organization made, is for, in the end, to communicate something. Okay? So, step-by-step process and explanation using the correct terminology. This is why these words are very important. And you will actually do it in this class, in the final project. When you design something, you will need to explain every single detail in it. Okay? So this is why this is important, the language of design. Okay? Here more examples of what? Rhythm by radiation, meaning we start with a center. Now look at this composition. What other rhythm does it have? Now it has rhythm by repetition. Repeat, element, the same element repeated. We have rhythm by gradation, because here we have big ones and then become smaller. And we have rhythm by radiation because it starts from a center. So 3 types of rhythm here. Okay? This is real object, 3D object. Again, there is a center. Rhythm by radiation. It starts from a center, and then all of these shapes are repeated. We have repetition, we have rhythm. Okay? But which type? Okay? There is here a small variation to this, to the rhythm by radiation, and it's called push radiation, which starts also from a center, but it doesn't go round in a circle. It's more in this shape, okay? But this is not very important. Important is the main one, which is rhythm by radiation. Do we have a center? This is enough for you to know. Now, there is also another type of rhythm called rhythm by opposition. Now, this is different than gradation. Gradation was what? Slowly change from one to another. Here we have sudden change. Like, for example, black next to it white. Like black, white. This is sudden transition. Even this can create rhythm. And we need to have angles, straight angles at 90 degrees. So vertical lines and horizontal lines. So a vertical line meeting a horizontal line. This is sharp transition, okay? And this can create rhythm. So this sharp transition with sharp color transitions can create rhythm. But you need to still have repetition of this. So if you notice that this interior, there is this square here. It's a big square. But if you see carefully inside here, there are small squares. Repeat, 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 repeat. So small squares, big squares, other types of rectangles and squares, everything. Look at the colors, black, white, sharp angles. This line with this line, 90-degree lines. And here we have squares, squares, a lot of squares here. Repetition of elements. So we have repetition of an element of design, meaning there is a rhythm. But which type? Then we see the sharp angles, we see the sharp color transitions. So we know we have rhythm by opposition here, okay? So if I want to design an interior with this type of rhythm, these are the requirements: 90-degree angles, very sharp color transitions. Now it doesn't have to be black-white. It can be white and red, for example, or black and green, but without transition. So it's one color next to it, different one. No slow transition. Okay? So we have sharp changes here, but if we have repetition, this can create rhythm also in a particular design. And the last one, rhythm by transition. Transition, it means it transitions from something to something else. So if you look at this table here, and consider this, for example, that it was a line. Look at it as a line. So we have straight, curve, straight, curve, straight. But there is no sharp transition here. It's there is no sharp change of the line. There is transition. Transition. It means slowly, smoothly. Your eye go from here to here. Also, if you see it as shapes, look at this shape here. This is the same here, and here a longer rectangle. But if you look at the table as a design, my eye goes smoothly transition from here to here. So we have a rhythm by transition. There is repetition. Where is the repetition here? Because we said we need to have repetition to have rhythm. Well, the line, look, this line is repeated here. This curve repeated here. Okay? This shape is repeated here. So we have repetition and we have some change. Some of them longer, some of them shorter, but we have straight curves repeated. So there is a repetition in a way, but our eyes also go smoothly from one part to another, so we have rhythm by transition here. Okay, so this was about rhythm and its different types. Now we will talk about emphasis. There are also several types of how to create emphasis in a design. Now, we heard this before. When did I give example of emphasis? When we talked about color, and I told you that you can use color in so many different ways in a design. And one thing was that you can use color to create emphasis. Like I draw you these circles, same size, same distance, everything the same, just I put color here. And I told you that your eyes will now go to this spot because it's colored. So, emphasis, which is drawing our attention to a focal point in a composition or a design, this is creating emphasis on this particular point for a reason. Maybe this is very important point. Usually when we have a composition and we have images, illustrations, text, usually we want to draw attention to a particular area first and then another area. So for example here the important is first the title. The title, then we have something else and something else. So there must be a hierarchy of importance. Because if we have just a composition and all the elements are equal in importance, you will not really see the information correctly because your eyes will go from here and here and here. Nothing particularly, like there is no hierarchy, and it will not create clarity in the way the information is conveyed. Usually we need emphasis to particular areas, okay? So this is very important principle of design. So I said color can be used. So for example here, what do we have? Repetition of the same shape. Oh, we have repetition. Do we have rhythm here? Yeah. Here we have rhythm, okay? So we have also other things going on. But let us stick with emphasis. So we have repetition of the shape. Only the color has been changed of this and rotated. But even if it's not rotated, the same meaning. So your eye go here. Here the same shape. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Just the color change, okay? Create emphasis. Here the same, okay? So color is a very strong element of design to use to create emphasis in a composition. But it is not the only method. So color is not the only way to do it. So what other ways do we have? So this is color. Okay? Okay, color we covered. What other things we have? Size. So if I have a composition, everything, all the elements are of a particular size, and then I change suddenly the size. So for example, small, like this, small circles, and then I make a big circle. The change of the size creates the emphasis, okay? So if a lot of the elements are the same size, but one becomes so big or so small, then your eye go to this. So it's basically the difference that create the emphasis. So something is different in the composition, and this is what creates drawing your attention to the different element. The same here. We can do it with shape. So for example, we have circle, 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 and then we have one square. So this is different. So it will draw our attention to the different point, to the different element. Now, I can have combination of these. I can have, for example, change of shape, like this square, plus color. I can put here a red color, plus I can make it bigger or smaller. So I can have all the three in one. And what will happen when I do that? It will become even stronger. Like the emphasis become more and more strong. So I have change of shape, plus I put color, plus I play around with the size. It becomes very strong emphasis. Or you can use only this, or only this, or only this. Okay? When we have text, emphasis is very important. And many designs include text of some type. You have titles, subtitles, main text, images, illustrations. Usually, if we are talking about any 2D design, have this. Brochures, business cards, posters, magazines, reports, everything have usually text, some kind of a text. So when you have text, emphasis becomes very important for the clarity of the information. So when you read the information, to be clear, easy to read, comfortable to read, and understand better. If everything is chaos, you will not understand. Okay? So with text, very important. There is many ways how to create emphasis with text alone. With text, okay? Like here. For example, we know that there are a lot of fonts, font types. Like this could be Times New Roman, we have Arial, we have Calibri, we have this, that. So many font types, okay? Now, the same font type and size, if I just change and make it bold. Bold, what's bold? So these lines that we see become black and thick and heavier. So making a text bold create emphasis to the text. Even if it's the same size and the same, everything else the same color, same everything. Making it bold creates emphasis. Brighter or darker, okay, could create emphasis. Changing of style. Like, is it, for example, straight, or, for example, I can make it italic. Okay? So this changing of style can create emphasis. Or I can use a different font type. Like, here is, for example, a font type. Here I use another font type. But you need to be very careful with the combinations. But two different fonts can create also emphasis to the different one. So if I have a lot of text in a font type, and here I have another font type, this will create the emphasis, okay? The way positive and negative space is arranged. The positive space is where the text is, but the negative is around it, okay? So for example, if you notice these sentences, there is a space, negative space in between. Now this size is the same, but then we go here and the size becomes so big. Why? And from the title to here, big. So why this big and this different? Because if we put it the same size, it will create confusion, like there is no separation between the title and the text. So how do you arrange the positive, negative space can create emphasis on, let's say, the title or subtitle or another part of the text. So arrangement of positive, negative space, important. You can take a text and surround it with box, for example, like it is here. Put even color. Then it creates emphasis to this particular text. Okay? So putting borders, frames, underline, for example, part of the text. So all of this create emphasis to the text that is different. Like this one is color. All of the rest black and white. So, so this is what create emphasis to a particular part. Changing the position. Where do you put the text? Where? Here or here or here in the composition. So, in the end, all of these elements, where are they placed? The placement very important. So, you might select the correct size, the correct color, the correct everything, but if you put it in the wrong location, it can also destroy a composition, the meaning of the composition. But there is many ways how to create emphasis using text. Here is just a general example of two compositions, and just to illustrate the importance of emphasis. So here, notice, what do we have? What elements of design? Shapes, right? Because why? These look like lines, but because they are closed, they are shapes. But the shapes are drawn using lines. So they are surrounded by line, okay? These circles. So this line here, what does it look like? What is the weight of the line? Weight, meaning how thick is it? What is its style? What does it look like? Okay? Notice that all of them are the same. The same weight, the same type of line is used for all of this composition. what does this make us feel? So when we look at it, our eyes don't see any emphasis, no emphasis. So my eye go here and here and here and here. Everywhere is calm and the same. Everything is important in the same way. Nothing is more important. But if we take one of these lines and we change the weight, so we make it bold. It's like the text. If we make the text bold, the same thing, okay? So the bold lines, the darker lines, they attract our attention first. So if I make this now dark and black and thick, then my attention will go to it. Even if it's a small circle, my attention will go to it, okay? So this is very important. It's not only to create importance to a particular area, but also to give dynamic to the design. It's like, imagine you draw something and you use the same line everywhere. The composition will become a little bit boring, it will look too flat, but if you add differences in line weight, it can create dynamic, it can look 3D, you can make something appear 3D. We already discussed this in lines. Okay? So the line type used, very important to create the effect, the dynamic of the composition, to make it look alive, not like a dead two-dimensional design without any important areas. Okay? So usually this is very important, emphasizing on certain areas and less emphasis on other areas. Okay? Because this can also create what? Interest in the design, to make it interesting. Why is this important? Because it draws the attention of the viewer. Now, if you see a very ugly design or something not interesting, you don't want to look at it. But if it's interesting, it will draw your attention. So this is also important in design. How to draw a viewer attention to something. It doesn't matter what am I designing, a poster, a chair, an interior, we need to draw attention. So if I'm a designer of this chair, and I design it in a very, very bad way, everybody look at it will just leave it. Nobody will buy it. But if it's beautiful and attractive and it draws my attention in a nice way, and then I come and I touch it even, oh, nice texture and stuff like that, nice material, so it will draw my attention to come close, to start touching it, and then buying it. Okay? So this is very important in design. Because you're designing real things. Real interiors, real products, real everything. And people will use it, and people will buy it. Pay money to buy something. How can you make someone pay if it's very ugly and not attractive? You know? So, this is important. Here, just more examples. So, you know, this, we included shapes. Here is other shapes, you know, top heavy, bottom heavy, the difference. Because every design, you have to measure with your eye. It must be planned. Where I want to put the heavy part, where I want to put the light part. It's like, if I put a shape that is dark at the top, it looks top heavy. If it's at the bottom, it looks bottom heavy. But the same I can do with information. Like, let's say if I have a poster and I put too much information here, too much text and images and details, and here no. It will become, this part look very heavy. Visual weight. It will look visually heavy, this light. If I do it the opposite way, like here, for example, nothing, only a title, then a lot of free space, then here, images, text, details, I don't know what, it becomes bottom heavy, okay? Or in the center, or like this. So, you see, this is the general organization of design. Where I want the heavy, where I want the light part, or do I want it balanced? We discussed balance already. Do we want it perfectly balanced, symmetrical, or asymmetrical balance? So these principles of design, they intermix in a design. So usually you don't have just one, you don't have just emphasis. you have emphasis, and you have to consider balance, you have to consider many, many principles of design. It's rare that you have just one element of design, one principle of design. It's usually a combination. Several elements, several principles come together to create the final composition. Okay? So, we are done for today. With these two principles, that's enough. Next class we continue. Okay?